Hey, what's up? This is Mr. Ippolito. Today we're going to go over the first inaugural address of Abraham Lincoln. Let's give you a little bit of context. Abraham Lincoln is sworn into office, right? Left hand on the Bible, raising your right hand, swearing to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, when he's doing this on March 4th, 1861, let's take a look at the map. These 7 states had already seceded, right? Which means they had already broken away from the United States, and they had declared that they are no longer going to be following the Constitution, following the laws of the United States, right? They are breaking away to form their own country, the Confederate States of America. So that's the backdrop. That is the context when we find ourselves with Abraham Lincoln now being sworn in as the 16th President of the United States, delivering this first inaugural address. We call it first because he's going to get sworn in again in 1865, right? He's going to get reelected, but this is his first inaugural address. So now let's go ahead and break this down paragraph by paragraph. Here's the first one. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of a Republican administration, their property, peace, and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all the published speeches of him who now addresses you. I do but quote from one of those speeches when I declare that I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so. In other words, Lincoln is saying, let me go ahead and switch over here, right? People of the South are afraid that he's going to take away their freedoms, basically their freedom to own property, right? Their freedom to own enslaved humans. And he is assuring them, you know what? You have no reason to fear. Just go ahead and calm down. Bring your fear level down, your apprehension level down, because that's not my plan. I am not planning to do this. Again, I've already said before that I'm not going to interfere with slavery in the states where it already exists. So let's go ahead and let's chill. That takes us now to the second paragraph, where he basically is talking about slavery. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but he's basically talking about the fugitive slave law, right? And he says, there's much controversy about the delivering up of fugitives from service or labor, delivering up fugitive slaves, right? People who have escaped from the South and have escaped into the North as fugitive slaves, particularly following the tougher fugitive slave law of 1850. And he's saying, you know what? We follow the law. The law, the Constitution, and the laws of the country say that if a runaway enslaved person escapes, that they don't automatically get their freedom. They have to be returned, right? And it is scarcely questioned that this provision was intended by those who made it for the reclaiming of what we call fugitive slaves. In other words, we have to follow the law, right? We need to follow the law because it is the law. There's lots of drama lately over the fugitive slave clause. Northerners are upset that they have to participate in this horrific practice, but we all follow the Constitution, even the parts we don't like, so we have to follow the law, right? Even if we don't like it, it's the law of the land. We have to follow it. So that's what Lincoln is saying in this next section. So now we move on to section 3. This is where he talks about, and again, Lincoln is a trial lawyer, right? He's been a trial lawyer for most of his life, so he knows what it's like to be in the courtroom and to try to make a case, and now he is making a case. Again, in the previous section, he said, you know what? Up here in the North, we have to follow the Constitution. The delivering up of fugitive slaves, even if we don't like it, it's the law of the land. We have to follow it. And so the South, you should be doing this as well, right? When it comes to protecting the rights of free black citizens, we need to do that also because, again, we're following the Constitution. That's what we do when we follow the law of the land. And so now we get into section 4, where he says it is 72 years since the first inauguration of a president. 72 years ago, if you recall, the very first president to be inaugurated, it's not a trick question, it's George Washington, right? So 72 years this country has been a nation, and 15 presidents before me have set examples, have set precedent, right? That's what we say when we're talking about an example for others to follow, a precedent. But I now enter upon the same task for the brief constitutional term of 4 years under great and peculiar difficulty. No president before me, not even George Washington, has faced the challenges that I now face because a disruption of the federal union, heretofore only menaced. So before the South was threatening, we might secede. If we're not happy, we might secede. We might break away. Heretofore, it has only been threatened. They've only been threatening to break away, now formidably attempted. In other words, they're actually trying it. There are 7 states that have now successfully seceded and broken away from the United States. So again, now here's Lincoln going into lawyer mode again, right? And so he's trying to make a legal argument about a constitution, about the creation of nations in general, right? I hold that in contemplation, when I think deeply about this, about universal law, and I think about the Constitution, the union of these states is perpetual. In other words, this country, this union, our union together is unceasing. It is never ending. It is perpetual. Perpetuity is implied, if not expressed, in the fundamental law of all national governments. You take a look at any country all over the world, and nowhere in any government of any nation do you see a clause or a provision that allows for its own destruction, its own termination, right? It is safe to assert that no government proper ever had a provision in its organic law for its own termination. In other words, no government in its right mind, no country in its right mind builds its own self-destruct button, which is why I put Dr. Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb there, right? Because Dr. Doofenshmirtz, if you're a fan of Phineas and Ferb, he always, every time he builds those innators, right, those devices, those diabolical evil machines, he always, for whatever reason, includes a self-destruct button. We're not sure why. It's why he's not a very good evil scientist or evil genius, right? And so he always builds that self-destruct button in there. And so Lincoln is saying, you would be foolish to build a self-destruct button into your own Constitution. And even though he doesn't say it, we know, because we've studied the Constitution already, who was the author of the Constitution. It was James Madison, right? James Madison, a Virginian, a slaveholder, was the author of most of the language of the Constitution. And so he would go on, although he doesn't mention it in this section right here, but I'm sure that Lincoln would go on to say, look, a slave owner helped to create, he created much of this Constitution. So why would he put in a plan for the cause of slavery, right? For the cause of trying to perpetuate slavery, why would he build in a clause to destroy the Constitution that he himself created? So that is Section 5 of Lincoln's first inaugural address. Now let's go ahead and look at Section 6, right? Again, if the United States be not a government proper. So again, this is Lincoln, the brilliant trial lawyer. So he's already made the argument about the Constitution and about how there's no self-destruct button in the Constitution. And so now he's going to argue contract law, right? Because he used to do this a lot when he was a trial lawyer. He would successfully argue contract law. So, all right, so let's say South. Let's say that you just argue that the Constitution was a mere contract, right? And that when the Constitution was first written, 13 individual states all got together and signed a contract and agreed to be in a contract together, right? So let's say you want to make that argument. And then as states, right, because we currently have 34, just shortly after the Civil War, we have 34 states now in the Union. So every time you add a new state, you have a new state that signs on to the contract, right? But if you're making that contract argument, one party to a contract may violate it, break it, so to speak, but does it not require all to lawfully rescind it? So in other words, if you're going to completely dissolve a contract, which is what he's arguing that the South is doing, or at least these 7 states in the South, they're just trying to destroy the contract and pretend like it never existed. And he's saying, wouldn't it require all 34 states, all 34 parties to this contract, wouldn't it require everybody if you're going to dissolve the contract? So now he's saying, you know what, from a constitutional law point of view, this is illegal. From a contract law point of view, this is also illegal for you to do, Southern states, what you're doing right now. So here in Section 7, this is probably the most incendiary, the most inflammatory language, right? The most fighting words that Lincoln uses in this entire 1861 inaugural. It follows from these views that no state upon its mere motion can lawfully get out of the Union. You can't do it. There's nothing built into the law that allows you to legally break away. That resolves and ordinances to that effect are legally void. So your state legislature can vote all they want to break away, but it still doesn't make it legal. And therefore, acts of violence, if you're going to commit violence, again, it hasn't happened yet, right? We're still March of 1861. So they've made the declarations and they've made the votes, but no violence has happened yet. But acts of violence within any state or states against the authority of the United States are insurrectionary or revolutionary according to circumstances. So he's coming out and he's saying, if you secede, you are violating national law and contract law. And if this secession leads to violence against the United States, then that becomes insurrection and that becomes treason against the United States. So again, this is This is very much like Lincoln putting it in very plain terms. You've already seceded, which is illegal. But if you commit violence in the pursuit of that secession, then that turns into insurrection and treason. And that is a whole other level of illegal and just against everything that the United States stands for. In Section 8 here, he's also adding, is there such perfect identity of interests among the states to compose a new union as to produce harmony only and prevent renewed secession? In other words, so you all are breaking away right now, right? You 7 states are breaking away. But have you ever thought of the possibility that you're forming this new nation, but somebody sometime somewhere is going to be unhappy, and then they're going to try to break away from the country that you have just created by breaking away? And this is a little bit of foreshadowing of what's going to happen up ahead in the Civil War, because when the 11 states that are ultimately going to become the Confederate States of America start fighting in the Civil War, there are going to be moments where, let's say that there are supplies, or let's say that there's food coming in for the Alabama volunteers, right? Well, let's say the Georgia volunteers are really hungry and they're like, oh, that food looks really good. And so sometimes it would be the case where the Alabama volunteers would say, nope, this supplies, this food right here, this is for the Alabama boys. You Georgia boys, you got to go get some food elsewhere. What? I thought we're all on the same team. I thought, like, we're hungry. Won't you share some of that food? So it happened among the Confederate Army, right, which is supposed to be a united force, a united front, right, fighting against the Union, that even then there was infighting and that there wasn't total agreement about the way in which resources should be allocated. So Lincoln is kind of like, you know what? You're trying to create this new country, but at some point, aren't you going to be fighting against each other if you are a nation that is built upon secession, right? So that's another argument that he's trying to make there in Section 8. All right, so now we're here in Section 9. And this is when, gosh, Lincoln is so brilliant at laying out a legal argument. Now he's going to bring divorce into this, because I don't know for sure if he ever dabbled in divorce law, marriage or divorce law, but he clearly is aware of it. Read this. Physically speaking, we cannot separate. We cannot remove our respective sections from each other, nor build an impassable wall between them. A husband and wife may be divorced and go out of the presence and beyond the reach of each other, but the different parts of our country cannot do this. In other words, he's saying, you know what? If there's a husband and wife, if there's a married couple, they get divorced, they can move away from each other. They can move away to different cities or different states or even different countries, right? So if a marriage doesn't work out and a marriage dissolves, then those two parties can move away from each other. They can separate from each other. But where are we going to go? If North and South are truly divorcing, are truly separating, where are we supposed to go? We're physically connected to one another. We can't go anywhere, right? So physically speaking, we cannot separate. The U.S. splitting up would be much more difficult than a divorce. And even divorce is difficult. Anybody who's experienced divorce in your family, you know how painful divorce can be. He's saying this would be even more painful because we share the same geography, the same continent. We have common culture. We have common memories, the same experiences. And so this is going to be as painful, if not more painful, than a divorce within a family. Lincoln, just like a good lawyer in Section 10 here, is building to his final argument, right? So he says, he's speaking directly to the Southerners now. In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war, right? The threat of civil war. This is looming. This could potentially happen. And that civil war is going to start a month later, right? The threat of civil war is in your hands, my Southern friends, and not in mine. You can have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors, right? The government will not assail you. Assail means to assault or attack, right? So in other words, if there's going to be a fight, I'm not going to be the one to start it. It is in your hands and not in mine. This is if it's going to be a fight, then you're going to be the one to start it. And then, he is so good with his language. Listen to this. You have no oath registered in heaven to destroy the government, right? So nowhere have you pledged, nowhere have you put your left hand on the Bible and raised your right hand to destroy the government, while I, because he literally just did it, because this is the inauguration day, right? Literally just moments before giving this speech, he says, while I shall have the most solemn one to preserve, protect, and defend it. In other words, Abraham Lincoln knows what a Christian nation the United States is in 1861. He knows how deeply people of faith believe in the Bible and believe in God and believe in making an oath in the presence of God. So when Abraham Lincoln places his left hand on the Bible and raises his right hand on the steps of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and pledges an oath under the Constitution to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, he says, I'm taking this seriously, right? I have pledged an oath under God to defend this Constitution, and I am ready to do it if I need to. If you push me, but I will not be the assailant, right? I will not be the aggressor, only you. And so now here's the final section, section 11. Listen to this language. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. A couple things I want to look at here. First of all, I want to ask you the question, logos, pathos, or ethos, which rhetorical device is Lincoln using here? I know many of you have already studied this in English, so logos is using logic, pathos is appealing to people's emotion, ethos is, your English teacher taught you something and I don't want to mess it up, but essentially he is appealing to pathos here, right? He is appealing, he's making an emotional appeal. He's trying to go for your heart right now, right? So I love that he has references to music in a couple of different ways, right? First of all, the mystic chords of memory. If you're a musician, if you know anything about music and you know what chords are, chords, like on a guitar or on a piano, chords are notes played together that sound good together, right? So the mystic chords of memory, in other words, like music, like musical notes being played together, we belong together. This country belongs together, right? Will yet swell the chorus of the Union. A chorus is a collection of voices all singing the same song at the same time, right? So again, using this music imagery, this musical metaphor to describe in a way that we are like in concert together. We should be in concert together, this whole country. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. These mystic chords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave. We fought together. North and South, we fought together in the Revolutionary War. We fought together in the War of 1812. We fought together in the Mexican-American War. From every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone. And a hearthstone, if you don't know, a hearth is a fireplace. Now, you might have a fireplace in your home. I have a fireplace in my home. I know that we don't use it, right? We have a central heater, so we don't ever use our fireplace. It's kind of blocked off. We don't ever use it. But back in the 1800s, back in the 1860s, families would definitely have used their fireplace, not only for heat for the home, because that was their only source of heat, but they also would have used it for cooking. They would have used it as Abraham Lincoln did when he was a young man, a boy and a young man, reading books, right? He was self-taught for the most part, reading books by the fireplace, by the hearth. And so from every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, he knew that the hearth, the fireplace, was the heart of the family, was the heart of the home. And so he's using such good imagery, such good rhetoric right now. He's using the power of his language to try to appeal to the better angels of our nature. So if you ever see those cartoons or the stories where they have like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on one shoulder, and you have like you should do, be selfish, think of yourself, do the wrong thing, and then you have the angel on the other shoulder, do the right thing, be selfless, like help others, be nice, be kind. And so he acknowledges that within our belief system, within the Christian belief system of the United States, those Judeo-Christian principles that so many Americans have, that they believe in this concept, right, of like devils and angels, right, of being tempted by Satan and being lured to do the right thing by angels. And so he's saying, let us listen to the better angels of our nature. We are more similar than we are different. What other notes do I have, right? He's ending his speech on a conciliatory, he's trying to offer a note of peace, right? He's finishing with kindness, he's finishing with friendship, with patriotism, and an appeal to the common bonds that unite all of us as Americans. All right, well, that is Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address from March 4th, 1861. I hope you have a better understanding now of not only the way that Lincoln operates, the way that he writes, the way that he uses language to try to persuade, but also the beginnings of the worst war that the United States has ever been a part of, and how Lincoln was trying desperately to avoid war, but how ultimately, deep down, I think he kind of knew that war was coming, and so he was making sure that both North and South. Americans of both North and South, knew exactly where he stood. So when the time came for war to break out, that he was ready and that he was preparing, particularly the Americans of the North, preparing for them to be ready to fight this bitter and cruel war. All right, thanks so much. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.